Hi. Okay, I can feel the resistance. I'm going to deep dive today. I'm going to share some stuff I have never shared before and some stuff that I have shared. It's about healing shame. And shame is really at the core of what gets in the way of a lot of our relationships with a lot of the goals that we have is shame about ourselves, the deep, dark secrets that we don't want anybody else to know about us. And we all have them. And I find myself being resistant to sharing because it's late, it's dark. I had to set up lights, and I have to give a talk tomorrow. All these wonderful excuses. But today is a very powerful day. It's the day before the full moon. And so the energy is just really concentrated. And so I'm doing this to see what happens. What I want to do is share, like confess. And in that process, by bringing out those deep, dark secrets, to release them, to have them no longer plague me. And in psychotherapy, that is one of the tactics. That's one of the procedures for healing. And certainly it's one of the things that I use is to encourage my clients to share their deepest secrets and allow the emotions to come up. And in that process, heal what they've been holding secret, what they've been holding down, which has been using so much energy and literally hurting them. And of course, we all have those. I was brought up a Catholic, and Catholics are well versed in the practice of confession. But they confess in dark rooms, in those little cubicles where they cannot see the other person on the other side, the priest, because they're confessing to God. And I could confess to God, but I'm going to confess to you. I have often talked in my Facebook Lives about the early childhood patterns that develop as a result of the wounds, the emotional wounds that we receive at the hands of our parents, often inadvertently. So my own wound came from the unfortunate transfer of my father to Japan when I was 2 years old. And in the time that he was gone, I lost my trust in him, in myself, and the universe. And so I never trusted him again. I decided, A, that I would not feel my feelings, which I literally tamped down. Of course, they would burst out, but I would mostly hide them, and I was clueless most of the time about what I was feeling for over 40 years. And the other thing I did was I became a people pleaser. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that, but what I am going to tell you about is as a result of my father leaving me. To this day, I wake up almost every morning overcome with a feeling of dread and fear. It's because it happened when I was very, very young and I had no control. And it was so terrifying to me that he was gone, somebody I cared about so much. And you might be saying, well, where was your mom? I didn't bond with my mother. My mother had 2 other daughters. And so we never really connected. And yet, that pleasing, I did want to please her. So the other thing, another confession, is that my mother was hard to please. She seemed like opaque to me. And she would ask for things, and I would do the best I could to give her what she wanted, and it was almost never right. And part of being a people pleaser is being a perfectionist, getting it right. And when she didn't get what she wanted, she would get upset. You might even call her hysterical. And I absorbed this, just like all children do, as a sponge. And I took this in, and I hated to make mistakes. And there was a period in my life, not too terribly long ago, when I would beat myself up for making mistakes. Now, I'm actually pretty good at getting things right, but I would forget something, or I would make a mistake, and I would secretly berate myself. I was merciless, cruel. The words that would come out of my mouth were horrific. And oftentimes, literally, my inner child would take over and would talk. So there was a time when my husband and I were living in a group home with a shared housing with two other subtenants. And one day I was in the back room berating myself for something I forgot, lost. I couldn't find my hairbrush. God knows what it was. And I was going on about how stupid I was. Have you ever told yourself that you're stupid? I think my mother must have said that to herself too. So I picked that up. You're stupid. How can you be so stupid? And one of the people in the house heard me. But he didn't think it was me. One of the other members in our house had his son living with him part-time. So he thought that the son was there. And he said, well, where is he? And I didn't say anything. But it was me. I was the little child screaming. Have you ever done that? Have you ever been so cruel to yourself that you beat yourself up? I remember one time I was so upset, and I have no idea. Of course, you forget. What was the reason that I really started slapping my face? I've done that several times. Really so frustrated that I would beat myself. That's, the internalizing of all the guilt, all the pain as you beat yourself up. So that's a story I have never shared before. I have a final story. Pleasing my father. I thought that the way to please him was by perfectionism. And part of that was getting degrees, doing well in school. So I got very good degrees, National Honor Society, Phi Beta Kappa. And then I went on to graduate school. And I eventually became one of two students in my graduate class who actually earned her PhD. And it took me like 10 years to finish it because I left school and I taught college for a while, and then I finally finished it. And my father came out to visit me. I was living on the Navajo reservation at the time, out in Fort Defiance. And he came with my brother. And I had just finally gotten the degree. And I said to him, well, what do you think about my getting my PhD? And he said to me that he was ashamed because he had never achieved a BA and his twin brother had. And so hearing that I had my PhD made him feel ashamed. I felt awful. I felt like somehow I had hurt him. And then, if that wasn't enough, I told my boss, I was working in this program that worked with Native Americans, and I had been, shortly after, I had been promoted and was taking over one of their projects. And I asked my boss if he would introduce me as Dr. Pepcolis. Seemed like a reasonable request. He said to me, I can't believe that you want to do that. Why don't you have it tattooed on your forehead? I was so shamed by that. I was so shamed that I didn't use my title for like 10 years. I hid it. I didn't ever even mention it in my resumes. I was so ashamed that I had been so full of myself, that I had identified myself as a PhD. It is still difficult for me, and oftentimes I forget to mention, oh yes, I have a PhD and years of experience working with people who have emotional wounds, because I don't want you to be held back by your emotional wounds. And so I invite you to share your stories if you would like to do that. Does this heal? I don't know. I'll get back to you. But that's the project, is to heal our emotional wounds by sharing, by bringing it out and saying, you know what? I'm not going to be shamed by this anymore. I'm going to tell the truth. So I can say a little bit more about the people pleasing. So one of the manifestations is perfection. The other one is doing whatever the other person asks of you, even if it is not something you want to do, because you are afraid to be rejected. And so, all right, so another here, might as well get them all out. When I was 17, I was in college, and I met a man who was way older than me. And he got me drunk, and he had sex with me, and I was a virgin. And I was appalled because I hadn't made the decision. I was literally inebriated. And then I decided to do it again, because I wanted to take power for myself and to choose as opposed to having it taken from me. But I trusted this guy, and he had sex with me. I guess it was around Christmas time, and I actually got pregnant from that. And this was back in the days you could not get legal abortions, and I managed to have it taken care of illegally. And that was a big shame. It's something that I don't talk about much, because you know what? I never had any children. That was my one and only shot, and I ended it. So that's my fourth shame. So how are your parental wounds holding you back from being who you truly are? That's what this is about, being yourself. That when you finally acknowledge your wounds, when you finally acknowledge the shame that's holding you back, that you can be yourself, that you can say, this is me with all the warts. And you know what? You can accept me. You can say, hey, I'd like to know more about her, or not. And that's it for today. If you want to have a conversation with me about your childhood wounds, if they're holding you back from stepping fully into your power, stepping into your strength, being your authentic self, there's a link over in the comments section. Schedule a 15-minute conversation with me, and I can tell you how I can help you to heal your wounds. Yes, even people who have had their own wounds can help others. That's it for tonight. Be brilliant, and bye for now.